picture of Boromir. Aragorn sped on up the hill. Every now and again he bent to the ground. Hobbits go light, and their footprints are not easy even for a ranger to read. But not far from the top a spring crossed the path, and in the wet earth he saw what he was seeking. I read the signs aright, he said to himself. Frodo ran to the hilltop. I wonder what he saw there. But he returned by the same way and went down the hill again. Aragorn hesitated. He desired to go to the high seat himself, hoping to see there something that would guide him in his perplexities. But time was pressing. Suddenly he leapt forward and ran
Hey,
to the
Noda,
summit,
how you doing?
across the great flagstones and up the steps. Then, sitting in the high seat, he looked out. But the sun seemed darkened, and the world dim and remote. He turned from the north, back again to the north, and saw nothing save the distant hills, unless it were that far away he could see again a great bird, like an eagle high in the air, descending slowly in wide circles down towards the earth. Even as he gazed, his quick ears caught sounds in the woodlands below. On the west side of the river, he stiffened. There were cries, and among them, to his horror, he could distinguish the harsh voices of orcs. Then suddenly, with a deep-throated call, a great horn blew, and the blasts of it smote the hills and echoed in the hollows, rising in a mighty shout above the roaring of the falls. "The horn of Boromir!" he cried. "He is in need!" He sprang down the steps and away, leaping down the path. Alas, an ill fate is on me this day, and all that I do goes amiss. Where is Sam? As he ran, the cries came louder, but fainter now, and desperately the horn was blowing. Fierce and shrill rose the yells of the orcs, and suddenly the horn call ceased. Aragorn raced down the last slope, but before he could reach the hill's foot, the sounds died away, and as he turned to the left and ran towards them, they retreated, until at last he could hear them no more. Drawing his bright sword and crying, "Elendil! Elendil!" he crashed through the trees. A mile, maybe, from Path Garland, in a little glade not far from the lake, he found Boromir. He was sitting with his back to a great tree, as if he was resting. But Aragorn saw that he was pierced with many black-feathered arrows. His sword was still in his hand, but it was broken near the hilt. His horn, cloven in two, was at his side. Many orcs lay slain, piled all about him and at his feet. Aragorn knelt beside him. Boromir opened his eyes and strove to speak. At last slow words came. "I tried to take the ring from Frodo," he said. "I'm sorry. I have paid." His glance strayed to his fallen enemies. 20 at least lay there. "They have gone, the halflings. The orcs have taken them. I think they are not dead. Orcs bound them." He paused and his eyes closed wearily. After a moment he spoke again. "Farewell, Aragorn. Go to Minas Tirith and save my people. I've failed." "No," said Aragorn, taking his hand and kissing his brow. "You have conquered. Few have gained such a victory. Be at peace. Minas Tirith shall not fall." Boromir smiled. "Which way did they go? Was Frodo there?" said Aragorn, but Boromir did not speak again. "Alas," said Aragorn, "thus passes the heir of Denethor, Lord of the Tower of God. This is a bitter end. Now the company is all in ruin. It is I that have failed. Vain was Gandalf's trust in me. What shall I do now? Boromir has laid it on me to go to Minas Tirith, and my heart desires it. But where are the ring and the bearer? How shall I find them and save the quest from disaster?" He knelt for a while, bent with weeping,
Excuse me.
still clasping Boromir's hand. So it was that Legolas and Gimli found him. They came from the western slopes of the hill silently, creeping through the trees as if they were hunting. Gimli had his axe in his hand, and Legolas his long knife. All his arrows were spent. When they came into the glen, they halted in amazement, and then they stood a moment with heads bowed in grief, for it seemed to them plain what had happened. "Alas," said Legolas, coming to Aragorn's side, "we have hunted and slain many orcs in the wood, but we should have been of more use here.
I hope everyone's
We came
having
when
a
we heard
good
the
night
horn.
out there, or
Too late,
good
it
morning,
seems.
depending what it's
I
like for
fear you
y'all.
have taken deadly hurt." "Boromir is dead," said Aragorn. "I am unscathed, for I was not here with him. He fell defending the hobbits, while I was away upon the hill." "The hobbits?" cried Gimli. "Where are they, then? Where's Frodo?" "I don't know," answered Aragorn wearily. "But before he died, Boromir told me that the orcs had bound them. He didn't think that they were dead. I sent him to follow Merry and Pippin, but I didn't ask him if Frodo or Sam were with him, not until it was too late. All that I've done today has gone amiss. What's to be done now?" "First we must tend the fallen," said Legolas. "We cannot leave him lying like carrion among these foul orcs." "But we must be swift," said Gimli. "He wouldn't wish us to linger. We must follow the orcs if there's hope that any of our company are living prisoners." "But we don't know whether the ring-bearer is with them or not," said Aragorn. "Are we to abandon him? Must we not seek him first? An evil choice is now before us." "Then let us do first what we must do," said Legolas. "We have not the time or the tools to bury our comrade fitly, or to raise a mound over him. A cairn we might build." "The labor would be hard and long. There are no stones that we could use nearer than the waterside," said Gimli. "Then let us lay him in a boat with his weapons, and the weapons of his vanquished foes," said Aragorn. "We will send him to the falls of Rauros, and give him to Anduin. The river of Gondor will take care at least that no evil creature dishonors his bones." Quickly they searched the bodies of the orcs, gathering their swords and cloven helms and shields into a heap. "See," cried Aragorn, "here we find tokens." He picked out from the pile of grim weapons 2 knives, leaf-bladed, damasked in gold and red. And searching further, he found also the sheaths, black, set with small red gems. "No orc tools these," he said. "They were borne by the hobbits. Doubtless the orcs despoiled them, but feared to keep the knives, knowing them for what they are, work of Westerners, wound about with spells for the bane of Mordor. Well now, if they still live, our friends are weaponless. I'll take these things, hoping against hope to give them back." "And I," said Legolas, "will take all the arrows that I can find, for my quiver is empty." He searched in the pile and on the ground about, and
How's
found
everyone's
my
evening
quiver
going?
undamaged, and longer in the shaft than such arrows as the orcs were
How's
accustomed
everyone's
to
evening
use.
going?
He looked at them closely, and Aragorn
What's
was
everyone smoking on?
and he said, "Here lie many that are not folk of Mordor. Some are from the north, from the misty mountains, if I know anything of orcs and their kinds. And here are others strange to me. Their gear is not after the manner of orcs at all. There were 4 goblin soldiers of greater stature, swart, slant-eyed, with thick legs and large hands. They were armed with short, broad-bladed swords, not with the curved scimitars usual with orcs, and they had bows of yew, in length and shape like the bows of men. Upon their shields they bore a strange device, a small white hand in the center of a black field. On the front of their iron helms was set an S rune, wrought of some white metal. "I have not seen these tokens before," said Aragorn. What do they mean? S is for Sauron, said Gimli. That is easy to read. Nay, said Legolas. Sauron does not use the elf runes. Neither does he use his right name, nor permit it to be spelt or spoken, said Aragorn. And he does not use white. The orcs in the service of Barad-dûr use the sign of the red eye. He stood for a moment and thought. S is for Saruman, I guess, he said at length. There is evil afoot in Isengard, and the west is no longer safe. It is as Gandalf feared. By some means the traitor Saruman has had news of our journey. It's likely, too, that he knows of Gandalf's fall. Pursuers from Moria may have escaped the vigilance of Lorien, or they may have avoided that land and come to Isengard by other paths. Orcs travel fast, but Saruman has many ways of learning news. Do you remember the bird? Well, we have no time to ponder riddles, said Gimli. Let us bear Boromir away. But after that we must guess the riddles, if we are to choose our course rightly, answered Aragorn. Maybe there is no right choice, said Gimli. Taking his axe, the dwarf now cut several branches. These they lashed together with bowstrings, and spread their cloaks upon the frame. Upon this rough bier they carried the body of their companion to the shore, together with such trophies of his last battle as they chose to send forth with him. It was only a short way, yet they found it no easy task, for Boromir was a man both tall and strong. At the waterside Aragorn remained, watching the bier, while Legolas and Gimli hastened back on foot to Parth Garland. It was a mile or more, and it was some time before they came back, paddling two boats swiftly along the shore. There is a strange tale to tell, said Legolas. There are only two boats upon the bank. We could find no trace of the other. Have orcs been there? Asked Aragorn. We saw no signs of them, answered Gimli. And orcs would have taken or destroyed all the boats, and the baggage as well. I will look at the ground when we come there, said Aragorn. Now they laid Boromir in the middle of the boat that was to bear him away. The grey hood and elven cloak they folded and placed beneath his head. They combed his long dark hair and arrayed it upon his shoulders. The golden belt of Lorien gleamed about his waist. His helm they set beside him, and across his lap they laid the cloven horn and the hilts and shards of his sword. Beneath his feet they put the swords of his enemies. Then fastening the prow to the stern of the other boat, they drew him out into the water. They rowed sadly along the shore, and turning into the swift-running channel, they passed the green sward of Parth Garland. The steep sides of Tol Brandir were glowing. It was now mid-afternoon.
Okay, no
As they went
stop out
south,
of it.
the fume of Rauros rose and shimmered before them, a haze of gold. The rush and thunder of the falls shook the windless air. Sorrowfully they cast loose the funeral boat. There Boromir lay, restful, peaceful, gliding upon the bosom of the flowing water. The stream took him while they held their own boat back with their paddles. He floated by them, and slowly his boat departed, waning to a dark spot against the golden light, and then suddenly it vanished. Rauros roared on unchanging. The river had taken Boromir, son of Denethor, and he was not seen again in Minas Tirith, standing as he used to stand upon the white but in Gondor days, the elven boat rode the falls and the foaming pool, and bore him down the and past the many mouths of Anduin, out into the great sea at night under the stars. For a while the three companions remained silent, gazing after him. Then Aragorn spoke. They will look for him from the White Tower, but he will not return from sea. And slowly he began to sing. Through row and over fen and field, where the long grass grows, the west wind comes walking, and about the walls.
That coughing fit actually hurt my back a little bit.
What news from the west, O wandering wind, do you bring to me tonight? Have you seen Boromir the tall, by moon or by starlight? I saw him ride the 7 streams over waters wide and grey. I saw him walk in empty lands until he passed away into the shadows of the north. I saw him then no more. The north wind have heard the horn of the son of Denethor. Oh, Boromir, from the high walls westward I looked afar, but you came not from the empty lands where no men are. Then Legolas sang, from the mouths of the sea, the south wind flies, from the sand hills and the stones. The wailing of the gulls it bears, and at the gate it moans. What news from the south, O sighing wind, do you bring to me at eve? Where now is Boromir the fair? He tarries, and I grieve. Ask not of me where he doth dwell, so many bones there lie. On the white shores and the dark shores, under the stormy sky. So many have passed down Anduin to find the flowing sea. Ask of the north wind news of them that north wind sends to me. O Boromir, beyond the gate, the seaward road runs south, but you came not with the wailing gulls from the grey sea's mouth. Then Aragorn sang again. From the gate of kings the north wind rides, and past the roaring falls, and clear and cold about the tower its loud horn calls. What news from the north, O mighty wind, do you bring to me today? What news of Boromir the bold, for he is long away? Beneath Amon Hen I heard his cry, there many foes he fought. His cloven shield, his broken sword, they to the water brought. His head so proud, his face so fair, his limbs they laid to rest. And Rauros, golden Rauros falls, bore him upon its breast. O Boromir, the tower of God, shall ever northward gaze, to Rauros, golden Rauros falls, until the end of days. So they ended. Then they turned their boat and drove it with all the speed they could against the stream, back to Pathgarland. You left the east wind to me, said Gimli, but I will say naught of it. That is as it should be, said Aragorn. In Minas Tirith they endure the east wind, but they do not ask it for tidings. But now Boromir has taken his road, and we must make haste to choose our own. He surveyed the green lawn, quickly but thoroughly, stooping often to the earth. No orcs have been on this ground, he said. Otherwise nothing can be made out for certain. All our footprints are here, crossing and recrossing. I cannot tell whether any of the hobbits have come back since the search for Frodo began. He returned to the bank, close to where the rill from the spring trickled out into the river. There are some clear prints here, he said. A hobbit waded out into the water and back, but I cannot say how long ago. How then do you read this riddle? Asked Gimli. Aragorn did not answer at once, but went back to the camping place and looked at the baggage. 2 packs are missing, he said, and one is certainly Sam. It was rather large and heavy. This, then, is the answer. Frodo has gone by boat, and his servant has gone with him. Frodo must have returned while we were all away. I met Sam going up the hill and told him to follow me, but plainly he did not. He guessed his master's mind and came back here before Frodo had gone. He didn't find it easy to leave Sam behind. But why should he leave us behind, and without a word? Said Gimli. That was a strange deed. And a brave deed, said Aragorn. Sam was right, I think. Frodo didn't wish to lead any friend to death with him in Mordor, but he knew that he must go himself. Something happened after he left us that overcame his fear and doubt.
One second, everyone.
Orcs came on him and he fled, said Legolas. He fled, certainly, said Aragorn, but not, I think, from orcs. What he thought was the cause of Frodo's sudden resolve and flight, Aragorn did not say. The last words of Boromir he long kept secret. Well, so much at least is now clear, said Legolas. Frodo is no longer on this side of the river. Only he can have taken the boat, and Sam is with him. Only he would have taken his pack. Our choice, then, said Gimli, is either to take the remaining boat and follow Frodo, or else to follow the orcs on foot. There is little hope either way. We have already lost precious hours. Let me think, said Aragorn. Now may I make a right choice, and change the evil fate of this unhappy day. He stood silent for a moment. I will follow the orcs, he said at last. I would have guided Frodo to Mordor and gone with him to the end, but if I seek him now in the wilderness, I must abandon the captives to torment and death. My heart speaks clearly at last. The fate of the bearer is in my hands no longer. The company has played its part, yet we that remain cannot forsake our companions while we have strength left. Come, we will go now. Leave all that can be spared behind. We will press on by day and dark. They drew up the last boat and carried it to the trees. They laid beneath it such of their goods as they did not need and could not carry away. Then they left Garland. The afternoon was fading as they came back to the glade where Boromir had fallen. There they picked up the trail of the orcs. It needed little skill to find. No other folk make such a trampling, said Legolas. It seems they delight to slash and beat down growing things that are not even in their way. But they go with a great speed for all that, said Aragorn, and they do not tire. And later we may have to search for our path in bare, hard lands. Well, after them, said Gimli. Dwarves too can go swiftly, and they do not tire sooner than orcs. But it will be a long chase. They have a long start. Yes, said Aragorn, we shall all need the endurance of dwarves. But come, with hope or without hope, we will follow the trail of our enemies, and woe to them if we prove the swifter. We will make such a chase as shall be accounted a marvel among the 3 kindreds, elves, dwarves, and men. Forth the 3 hunters. Like a deer he sprang away. Through the trees he sped. On and on he led them, tireless and swift, now that his mind was at last made up. The woods about the lake they left behind. Long slopes they climbed, dark, hard-edged against the sky already red with sunset. Dusk came. They passed away, grey shadows in a stony land. Chapter 2. The Riders of Rohan. Dusk deepened. Mist lay behind them among the trees below and brooded on the pale margins of their windows, but the sky was clear. Stars came out, the waxing moon in the west, and the shadows of the rocks were black. They had come to the edge of stony hills, and the pace was slower, but the trail was no longer easy to follow. Here the highlands of the wheel ran from north to south in two long tumbled ridges. The western side of each ridge was steep and difficult, but the eastward slopes were gentler, furrowed with many gullies and ravines. All night the three companions scrambled in this stony land, climbing to the first and tallest ridge, and down again into the darkness of the winding valley on the other side. There in the still, cool hour before dawn, they rested for a brief space. The moon had long gone down. The stars glittered above them. The first light of day had not yet come over the dark behind. For the moment, Aragorn was at a loss. The orcs had come into the valley, but there it had vanished. Which way would they turn, do you think? Said Legolas. Northward to the distant road to Isengard or Fangorn, if that is their aim, as you guess, or southward to strike the Entwash. They will not make for the river they might aim at, said Aragorn. And unless there is Rohan, and the power of Saruman is greatly increased, they will take the shortest way that they can find over the hills of the Rohirrim. The dale ran like a stony trough between the ridged hills, and a trickling stream flowed among the boulders. A cliff on their right. To their left rose hills, dim and shadowy. They went on for a mile or more northwards. Aragorn was searching, bent towards the ground, among the folds and gullies leading up into the western ridge. Legolas was some way ahead. Suddenly the elf gave a cry, and the others came running towards him. We have already overtaken some of those that we are hunting, he said. Look, he pointed. And they saw that what they had at first taken to be boulders lying at the foot of the slope were huddled bodies. 5 dead orcs lay there. They had been hewn with many cruel strokes, and 2 had been beheaded. The ground was wet with blood. Here is the said Gimli, but it needs the light of day, and with that we cannot wait. Yet, however you read it, it seems not unhopeful, said Legolas. Enemies of the orcs are likely to be our friends. Do any folk hills? No, said Aragorn. The Rohirrim seldom come, and it is far from Minas Tirith. It might be that some company of men were hunting here for reasons that we do not know. Yet I think not. What do you think? Said Gimli. I think that the enemy brought his own enemy with him, answered Aragorn.
That would hurt.
These are northern orcs from far away. Among the slain are none of the great orcs with a strange family. There was a quarrel, I guess. It is no uncommon thing with these quarrels. Maybe there was some dispute about the road. Or about the captives, said Gimli. Let us hope that they, too, did not meet their end here. Aragorn searched the ground in a wide circle, but no other traces of the fight could be found. They went on. Already the eastward sky was turning pale, the stars were fading, and the sun was slowly growing. To the north, they came to a fold in which the stream, falling and winding, had cut a stony path down into the valley. In it some bushes grew, and there were patches of grass upon its sides. At last, said Aragorn, here are the tracks that we seek. Up this water channel, this is the way that the orcs went after their debate. Swiftly they turned and followed them. As if fresh from a night's rest, they sprang from stone to stone. At last they reached the crest of the grey hill, and a sudden breeze blew in their hair and stirred their cloaks, the chill wind of dawn. Turning back, they saw across the river the far hills kindled. Day leaped into the sky. The red rim of the sun rose over the shoulders of the dark land. Before them in the west, the world lay still, formless and grey. But even as they looked, the shadows of night melted. The colours of the waking earth returned. Green flowed over the wide meads of Rohan. The white mist shimmered in the water vales, and far off to the left, 30 leagues or more, blue circles stood the white mountains, rising into peaks of jet. Rolling snows flushed with the rose of morning. "Gondor! Gondor!" cried Aragorn. "Would that I looked on you again in happier hour. Not yet does my road lie southward to your bright streams. Gondor, Gondor, between the mountains and the sea. West wind blew there, the light upon the silver tree fell like bright rain in gardens of the kings of old. O proud walls, white towers, O winged crown and throne of gold! O Gondor, Gondor, shall men behold the silver tree, or west wind blow again between the mountains and the sea?" "Now let us go," he said, drawing his eyes away from the south, and looking out west and north to the way that he must tread. The ridge upon which the cathedral stood went down steeply before their feet. Below it, 20 fathoms or more, there was a wide and rugged shelf which ended suddenly in the brink of a sheer cliff, the east walls of Rohan. So ended the Emyn Muil, and the green plains of the Rohirrim stretched away before them to the edge of sight. "Look!" cried Legolas, pointing up into the pale sky above them. "There is the eagle again. He is very high. He seems to be flying now away, from this land back to the north. He is going with great speed. Look!" "No, not even my eyes can see him, my good Legolas," said Aragorn. "He must be far aloft indeed. I wonder what is his errand, and if he is the same bird that I have seen before. But look, I can see something nearer at hand and more urgent. There is something moving over the plain." "Many things," said Legolas. "It is a great company on foot, but I cannot say more, nor see what kind of folk they may be. They are many leagues away, 12, I guess, but the flatness of the plain is hard to measure." "I think, none the less, that we no longer need any trail to tell us which way to go," said Gimli. "Let us find a path down to the fields as quick as may be." "I doubt if you will find a path quicker than the one that the orcs chose," said Aragorn. They followed their enemies now by the clear light of day. It seemed that the orcs had pressed on with all possible speed. Every now and again the pursuers found things that had been dropped or cast away. Food bags, the rinds and crusts of hard grey bread, a torn black cloak, a heavy iron-nailed shoe broken on the stones. The trail led them north along the top of the escarpment, and at length they came to a deep cleft, carved in the rock by a stream that splashed noisily down. In the narrow ravine, a rough path descended like a steep stair into the plain. At the bottom they came with a strange suddenness on the grass of Rohan. It swelled like a green sea up to the very foot of the Emyn Muil. The falling stream vanished into a deep growth of cresses and water plants, and they could hear it tinkling away in green tunnels, down long, gentle slopes towards the fens of Entwash Vale far away. They seemed to have left winter clean to the hills behind. Here the air was softer and warmer, and faintly scented, as if spring was already stirring, and the sap was flowing again in herb and leaf. Legolas took a deep breath, like one that drinks a great draught after long thirst in barren places. "Ah, the green smell," he said. "It is better than much sleep. Let us run." "Light feet may run swiftly here," said Aragorn. "More swiftly, maybe, than iron-shod orcs. Now we have a chance to lessen their lead. They went in single file, running like hounds on a strong scent, and an eager light was in their eyes. Nearly due west, the broad swath of the marching orcs tramped its ugly slot. The sweet grass of Rowan had been bruised and blackened as they passed. Presently Aragorn gave a cry and turned aside. "Stay!" he shouted. "Do not follow me yet." He ran quickly to the right, away from the main trail, for he had seen footprints that went that way, branching off from the others, the marks of small, unshod feet. These, however, did not go far before they were crossed by orc prints, also coming out from the main trail behind and in front, and then they curved sharply back again and were lost in the tramping. At the furthest point, Aragorn stooped and picked up something from the grass. Then he ran back. "Yes," he said, "they are quite plain. A hobbit's footprints. Pippin's, I think. He is smaller than the other. And look at this." He held up a thing that glittered in the sunlight. It looked like the new opened leaf of a beech tree, fair and strange in that treeless plain. "The brooch of an elven cloak," cried Legolas and Gimli together. "Not idly do the leaves of Lorien fall," said Aragorn. "This did not drop by chance. It was cast away as a token to any that might follow. I think Pippin ran away from the trail for that purpose." "Then he at least was alive," said Gimli. "And he had the use of his wits, and of his legs too. This is heartening. We do not pursue in vain." "Let us hope that he did not pay too dearly for his boldness," said Legolas. "Come, let us go on. The thought of those merry young folk driven like cattle burns my heart." The sun climbed to the noon, and then rode slowly down the sky. Light clouds came up out of the sea in the distant south, and were blown away upon the breeze. The sun sank. Shadows rose behind, and reached out long arms from the east. Still the hunters held on. One day now had passed since Boromir fell, and the orcs were yet far ahead. No longer could any sight of them be seen in the level plains. As nightshade was closing about them, Aragorn halted. Only twice in the day's march had they rested for a brief while, and 12 leagues now lay between them and the eastern wall where they had stood at dawn. "We have come at last to a hard choice," he said. "Shall we rest by night, or should we go on while our will and strength hold?" "Unless our enemies rest also, they will leave us far behind if we stay to sleep," said Legolas. "Surely even orcs must pause on the march," said Gimli. "Seldom will orcs journey in the open under the sun, yet these have done so," said Legolas. "Certainly they will not rest by night." "But if we walk by night, we cannot follow their trail," said Gimli. "The trail is straight, and turns neither right nor left as far as my eyes can see," said Legolas. "Maybe I could lead you at guess in the darkness, and hold to the line," said Aragorn. "But if we strayed, or they turned aside, then when light came, there might be a long delay before the trail was found again." "And there is this also," said Gimli. "Only by day can we see if any tracks lead away. If a prisoner should escape, or if one should be carried off, eastward, say, to the great river, toward Mordor, we might pass the signs and never know it." "That is true."
Definitely like this chair.
"But if I read the signs
Maybe
rightly,
second hand, but
the White Hand prevailed.
it's better
No
than
company
nothing.
is now
And
bound
comfortable.
for Isengard. Their present course bears
I got
them
it
out.
from
Yet it would
our
be
neighbor.
rash to be sure of their counsels.
He was gonna toss it,
And what of
and then
escape?
before he tossed it,
In the dark, we should
he
have
asked us
passed
if we
the
wanted
signs
it.
that led you to the brooch.
I said, yeah,
The orcs will
I could
be
use it.
doubly on their guard since then.
Toss
The
it isn't
prisoners
like
even wearier,
not being
said
because
Legolas.
it was messed
There will
up
be
or
no
anything like
escape
that. Just
again
he was
if we
getting
do
rid
not
of it
contrive
because it was
How
taking
that
up
is
too
to be
much
done cannot be guessed.
space.
But first, we must
The only thing
overtake
that's missing is
and
one in the
yet we must
armrest, but
parley. dwarf of
the
many
way
journeys,
the way
and
it
not the
sits,
least hardy of my
my
folk
bed
cannot run all
right
the way
here
to Isengard
is the
without any
armrest,
pause,
so
said
it
Gimli.
works out.
My heart burns me too,
Doesn't get in the way,
and I would have started
and if
sooner,
it had it on there,
but now
it would
I
get
must
in the
rest
way.
a little to run the better. And
The
if we
most I
rest,
did was
then the blind night is the time to
on
do
the
so.
seat.
I said that it was a hard choice, said Aragorn. How shall we end this debate?
I put
You are our guide,
a memory
and you
memory
are
foam
skilled
pad
in the
on it
chase. You
and a
shall
blanket
choose.
on top of it, just
My
for
heart beats me
extra
go on,
cushioning.
said Legolas. But we must hold together. I will follow your counsel. You give me
Because
choice
since it
to
was
any
secondhand,
chooser, said
the seat
Aragorn.
part was well
Since
broken
we
in,
passed
so
through the Argonath, my choices have gone amiss.
just to have that
From
extra
sight,
padding,
gazing north and
definitely
west into
easier on the
gathering
back.
night for a long while. We will not walk
And I
in the
guess the
dark,
other thing
he
that's
said again.
missing, he told us,
The
was,
peril of
well,
missing the trail or
like
signs
this
of others
thing for
coming
like
joined
you can
to
rest your
bring the
neck on.
data.
I guess
It will
there's
move
one
a wave of light.
lower
We will
down
use it, but
in the
alas,
seat. That's
he
supposed to
said
be, I
further,
guess, for
it
a
is yet young and
lower
pale,
back support.
and tonight it
And
is
that
shrouded
was the
in
only things
red.
that pretty much were missing. So,
Would that the lady had given us a light,
and it
such
was
as
free.
she gave to Frodo. It will
Can't
be
complain
more
on
needed
free
where it
shit.
is bestowed, said Aragorn.
Cause I looked at the
With him
prices for
lies
these
the true
types of
quest.
chairs.
Ours is but a small
They
matter
ain't
in the
cheap.
great deeds of this time.
At least
A
for me,
vain
they ain't
pursuit
cheap.
from
They're
its
like
beginning
$100,
to maybe.
$200 for
No choice of mine can mar
low
the
end
end.
ones.
Well, I have
They
chosen,
go up there in prices,
so let
but
us
just
use
for the
the
low
time
end ones,
as
you're
best we may.
gonna be dropping almost
He
200,
cast himself on the ground and fell at once into sleep.
and then get this
For he
for
hadn't
pretty much a
slept since
kick
their
down.
night under the shadow
Hey,
of tall Brandir. Before dawn was in the sky, he
definitely
woke and
helps.
rose. Gimli was still deep in slumber, but Legolas was standing, gazing northwards into the darkness,
And that's
thoughtful and
definitely
silent
way
as a young
comfortable
tree in
too.
a windless night.
I could sit here
They
for
are
hours
far,
just
far
either
away,
doing this
he
or
said sadly,
watching a
turning to
movie
Aragorn. I
and
know
not
in
have a
my
problem
heart
with my back
that
or
they
nothing.
haven't rested this night. Only an eagle could overtake them now.
I'll
Nonetheless,
eventually
we will still follow as we may, said Aragorn.
get enough saved up to where
He roused the dwarf.
I'll be able to get
We must go, he said.
a brand
The
new
scent is
one.
growing cold. But it's still dark, said Gimli. Even Legolas on a hilltop couldn't see them till the sun is up. I fear they've passed beyond my sight from hill or plain, under moon or sun, said Legolas. Where sight fails
And even
the
I
earth
do
may
that,
be as rumour.
this one right here
The land must
will
groan
still be in
under
the
their
house.
heavy
It'll just
feet.
probably be in
He stretched himself
the
upon
kitchen or
ground,
the living
his
room,
ear pressed against the turf.
so we can use for
He lay there motionless
extra seats for
for
company.
so long a time that
Since we don't
Gimli
have
wondered if he had
that many
swooned or
like
fallen asleep again.
sofa type chairs.
Dawn came glimmering, and slowly a grey light grew about them.
We have our two
At
that you
last
guys
he
always
rose,
see.
and now his
Then we
friends
have
could see his
another
face.
one
It was
that's
pale and drawn,
to my
and his
right
look
from
was
where I
troubled.
usually sit, and it's
The
one of
growth
those
of the
big
earth is
oversized
dim and
chairs,
confused, he said.
so you can actually sit there and
Nothing
just
walks
curl
upon it
up
for
there
many miles about us.
or
Faint and
lay
far
it
are the feet of
completely
our
out,
enemies,
and it's almost a
but
bed.
loud are the hooves of the horses. It comes to my mind that I heard them, even as I lay on the ground in sleep, and they troubled my dreams.
I've had to use it for a bed a couple
Past in the
times
west, but now
when
they
I
are
had
drawing
my
ever further from us, riding northward.
my
I
appendix
wonder
out.
what is happening
I
in this
couldn't lay on
land,
my bed because my
Let us
bed
go,
at that time
said Legolas.
was a lot lower, but I still wouldn't have been able to
So the
lay on
third
it just
day of their
because
pursuit began.
the way they did the surgery for
During all
my
its long
appendix,
hours of
my whole
cloud and
stomach and
fitful
all that
sun, they
was
hardly paused, now
yeah
striding,
painful
now
just
running,
to sit up.
as if no weariness
And
could
sitting
quench
up from
the
a
fire
bed
that
is a
burned
lot
them. They seldom
harder
spoke.
than sitting up from a
Over the
recliner.
wide solitude
Because
they
the recliner you
passed,
can slowly
and their
sit up.
elven cloaks faded against the background of the grey-green
Yeah, I had to
fields.
sleep in it a couple of times just
Even in the
because.
cool sunlight of
Yeah.
midday, few but elvish eyes would have marked them until they were close at hand. Often in their hearts they thanked the Lady of Lorien for the gift of Lemba, for they could eat of it and find new strength even as they ran. All day the track of their enemies led straight on, going northwest without a break or turn. As once again the day wore to its end, they came to long, treeless slopes, where the land rose, swelling up towards a line of low, humpbacked downs ahead. The Orc trail grew fainter, as it bent north towards them, for the ground became harder and the grass shorter. Far away to the left, the river Entwash wound, a silver thread in a green floor. No moving thing to be seen. Often Aragorn wondered that they saw no sign of beast or man. The dwellings of the Rohirrim were for the most part many leagues away to the south, under the
Because I already have a couple of my
now hidden in mist and
like
time.
the eBay and the
Yet
different
horse
shopping
lords
ones for
formerly kept many
it's one of
herds and
those
studs in the
pads you can put like
this easterly
on your
region of
chairs
their
like
realm.
this that go from the
And
back
there the
to
herdsmen had wandered
where you
much,
sit down.
living in camp and tent, even in winter time. But now all the land was empty, and there was silence that did
Good
not
to
seem
see you
to be
too,
the quiet of peace. At dusk they
uncooked
halted
supper.
again. Now
Welcome.
twice 12 leagues they had passed over the plains of Rohan.
Oh, I already have your bell rung too. Nice.
Was lost in the shadows of the east. The young moon was glimmering in a misty sky, but it gave small light, and the stars were veiled.
Oh, you're on the clock?
Now do
Hell
I
yeah.
most grudge a time
Definitely appreciate you
or any
stopping by real quick, bro.
Said Legolas. The orcs have run before us, as if the very whips of Sauron were behind them.
Definitely good to see you too. Hope you've been
doing
well.
Hills, and even
yeah, I know I do mine kind of late for
the trees.
for a lot of people.
This is a bitter end to our hope and to all our toil, he said. To hope, maybe, but not to toil, said Aragorn. We shall not turn back here, yet I am weary. He gazed back along the way that they had come towards the night gathering in the east. There is something strange at work in this land. I distrust the silence. I distrust even the full moon. The stars are faint, and I am weary as I have seldom been before. Weary as no ranger could be with a clear trail to follow.
And that hurts once in a while.
Speed to our foes and sets an unseen barrier before us. A weariness that is in the heart more than in the limb. Truly, said Legolas, that I have known since first we came down from the Emondale. For the will is not behind us, but before us. He pointed away over the land of Rohan,
someone says your
into the
username.
west under the sickle moon. Saruman, muttered Aragorn, but he shall not.
I had to look at it twice, like make sure I was reading it right.
See, even the moon is falling into gathering
but
clouds.
It's hard for me to.
North lies
my glasses are kind of
when day returns.
All taped up right now.
As before, Legolas was first afoot, if indeed he had ever slept. Awake, awake! He cried. It is a red
Thanks,
dawn.
bro. It's all good.
Things await us by the deeds of the forest. Good or evil, I do not know, but we are called. Awake! The others sprang up.
It acts up once in a while.
At once they set off again. Slowly the downs drew near. It was still an hour before noon when they reached them.
I've got to get like a good compression bracelet that will go from here to about here. It's just hard trying to find one like that.
Some 10 miles wide, lay between them and the river, wandering deep in dim thickets of reed and rush. Just to the west of the southernmost slope, there was a great ring, where the turf had been torn and beaten by many trampling feet. From it, the Orc Trail ran out again, turning north along the dry skirts of the hills. Aragorn halted and examined the tracks closely. They rested
here a while, I think I've grown used to.
Even the outward trail is
already old. It's pretty much.
I fear that your heart spoke truly, Legolas. It is thrice 12 hours, I guess.
It's a daily basis for me.
Where we now stand.
I've gotten used to it to a point.
Then at sundown yesterday, they would reach the borders of Fangorn. I can see nothing away north or west, but grass dwindling into mist, said Gimli. Could we see the forest if we climbed the hills? It's still far away, said Aragorn.
I've definitely had a eventful life.
8 leagues or more to the north.
My body's definitely
to the issuing
paid the price for it for the most part.
Still a wide land, another 15 leagues it may be. Well, let us go on, said Gimli. My legs must forget the miles. They would be more willing if my heart were less heavy. The sun was sinking when at last they drew near to the end of the line.
Probably wouldn't be as bad as it is,
For many hours they had marched without rest.
Most I do for the pain is
and Gimli's back was bent.
Smoke some wax,
Stone hard,
smoke me a bowl.
Labor or journey. But this endless chase began to tell on him. As all hope failed in his heart, Aragorn walked behind him, grim and silent, stooping now and again to scan some print or mark upon the ground. Only Legolas still stepped as lightly as ever, his feet hardly seeming to press the grass, leaving no footprints as he passed. But in the waybed of the elves he found all the sustenance that he needed, and he could sleep, if sleep it could be called by men, resting his mind in the strange paths of elvish dreams, even as he walked open-eyed in the light of this world. "Let us go up onto this green hill," he said. Wearily they followed him, climbing the long slope until they came out upon the top. It was a round hill, smooth and bare, standing by itself, the most northerly of the downs. The sun sank and the shadows of evening fell like a curtain. They were alone in a grey, formless world without mark or measure.
Do you?
Only far away northwest, there was a deeper darkness against the dying light, the mountains of mist and the forest at their feet. "Nothing can we see to guide us here," said Gimli. "Well, now we must hold again and wear the night away. It's growing cold."
"The
wind is north from the snows," said Aragorn. "And ere morning it will be in the east," said Legolas. "But rest, if you must. Yet do not cast all hope away. Tomorrow is unknown. Reed oft is found at the rising of the sun." "3 suns already have risen on our chase and brought no counsel," said Gimli. The night grew ever colder. Aragorn and Gimli slept fitfully, and whenever they awoke, they saw Legolas standing beside them, or walking to and fro, singing softly to himself in his own tongue, and as he sang, the white stars opened in the hard black vault above. So the night passed. Together they watched the dawn grow slowly in the sky, now bare and cloudless, until at last the sunrise came. It was pale and clear. The wind was in the east, and all the mists had rolled away. Wide lands lay bleak about them in the bitter light. Ahead and eastward, they saw the windy uplands of the wold of Rohan that they had already glimpsed many days ago from the great river. Northwestward stalked the dark forest of Fangorn. Still 10 leagues away stood its shadowy eaves, and its further slopes faded into the distant blue. Beyond there glimmered far away, as if floating on a grey cloud, the white head of tall Methedras, the last peak of the misty mountains. Out of the forest the Entwash flowed to meet them.
That was weird.
Its stream now swift and narrow, and its banks deep cloven. The Orc trail turned from the downs towards it. Following with his keen eyes the trail to the river, and then the river back towards the forest, Aragorn saw a shadow on the distant green, a dark, swift-moving blur. He cast himself upon the ground and listened again intently. But Legolas stood beside him, shading his bright elven eyes with his long, slender hand, and he saw not a shadow, nor a blur, but the small figures of horsemen, many horsemen, and the glint of morning on the tips of their spears was like the twinkle of minute stars beyond the edge of mortal sight. Far behind them a dark smoke rose in thin, curling threads. There was a silence in the empty fields, and Gimli could hear the air moving in the grass. "Riders!" cried Aragorn, springing to his feet. "Many riders on swift steeds are coming towards us." "Yes," said Legolas, "there are 105. Yellow is their hair, and bright are their spears. Their leader is very tall." Aragorn smiled. "Keen are the eyes of the elves," he said. "Nay, the riders are little more than 5 leagues distant," said Legolas. 5 leagues or 1, said Gimli. "We can't escape them in this bare land. Shall we wait for them here, or go on our way?" "We will wait," said Aragorn. I am weary, and our hunt has failed, or at least others were before us, for these horsemen are riding back down the Orc trail. We may get news from them. Or spears, said Gimli. There are 3 empty saddles, but I see no hobbits, said Legolas. I didn't say that we should hear good news, said Aragorn, but evil or good, we'll await it here. The 3 companions now left the hilltop, where they might be an easy mark against the pale sky, and they walked slowly down the northward slope. A little above the hill's foot they halted, and wrapping their cloaks about them, they sat huddled together upon the faded grass. The time passed slowly and heavily. The wind was thin and searching. Gimli was uneasy.
Snoopy.
What do you know of these horsemen, Aragorn? He said. Do we sit here waiting for sudden death? I've been among them, answered Aragorn. They are proud and willful, but they are true-hearted, generous in thought and deed, bold but not cruel, wise but unlearned, writing no books but singing many songs after the manner of the children of men before the dark years. But I don't know what has happened here of late, nor in what mind the Rohirrim may now be between the traitor Saruman and the threat of Sauron. They've long been the friends of the people of Gondor, though they are not akin to them. It was in forgotten years long ago that Eorl the Young brought them out of the north, and their kinship is rather with the Bardings of Dale, through the Beornings of the wood, among whom may still be seen many men tall and fair, as are the riders of Rohan. At least, they'll not love the orcs. But Gandalf spoke of a rumor that they paid tribute to Mordor, said Gimli. I believe it no more than did Boromir, answered Aragorn. You will soon learn the truth, said Legolas. Already they approach. At length even Gimli could hear the distant beat of galloping hooves. The horsemen, following the trail, had turned from the river and were drawing near the downs. They were riding like the wind. Now the cries of clear, strong voices came ringing over the fields. Suddenly they swept up with a noise like thunder.
Give me 1 second, everyone. Be right back.
Passing by the foot of the hill and leading the host back southward along the western skirts of the downs. After him they rode, a long line of mail-clad men, swift, shining, fell and fair to look upon. Their horses were of great stature, strong and clean-limbed. Their greatcoats glistened. Their long tails flowed in the wind. Their manes were braided on their proud necks. The men that rode them matched them well, tall and long-limbed. Their hair, flax and pale, flowed under their light
had to turn the AC on.
Streamed in long braids behind them. Their faces were stern.
That was getting a little hot in here.
In their hands were tall spears of ash. Painted shields were slung at their backs. Long swords were at their belts. Their burnished skirts of mail hung down upon their knees. In pairs they galloped by, and though every now and then one rose in his stirrups and gazed ahead and to either side, they appeared not to perceive the 3 strangers sitting silently and watching them. The host had almost passed, when suddenly Aragorn stood up and called in a loud voice, "What news from the north, riders of Rohan?" With astonishing speed and skill they checked their steeds, wheeled, and came charging round. Soon the 3 companions found themselves in a ring of horsemen moving in a running circle, up the hill slope behind them and down, round and round them, and drawing ever inwards. Aragorn stood silent, and the other 2 sat without moving, wondering what way things would turn. Without a word or cry, suddenly the riders halted. A thicket of spears were pointed toward the strangers, and some of the horsemen had bows in hand, and their arrows were already fitted to the string. Then one rode forward, a tall man, taller than all the rest. From his helm as a crest a white horse tail flowed. He advanced until the point of his spear was within a foot of Aragorn's breast. Aragorn did not stir. "Who are you? And what are you doing in this land?" said the rider, using the common speech of the West in manner and tone like the speech of Boromir, man of Gondor. I am called Strider, answered Aragorn. I came out of the north. I am hunting orcs. The rider leapt from his horse, giving his spear to another who rode up and dismounted at his side. He drew his sword and stood face to face with Aragorn, surveying him keenly, and not without wonder. At length he spoke again. At first I thought that you yourselves were orcs, he said, but now I see that it's not so. Indeed, you know little of orcs. If you go hunting them in this fashion, they are swift and well armed, and they were many. You would have changed from hunters to prey, if ever you had overtaken them. But there's something strange about you, Strider. He bent his clear, bright eyes again upon the ranger. That is no name for a man that you give. And strange, too, is your raiment. Have you sprung out of the grass? How did you escape our sight? Are you elvish folk? No, said Aragorn. One only of us is an elf, Legolas, from the woodland realm in distant Mirkwood. But we have passed through Lothlorien, and the gifts and favour of the lady go with us. The rider looked at them with renewed wonder, but his eyes hardened. Then there is a lady in the golden woods, as old tales tell, he said. You escape her nets, they say. These are strange days. But if you have her favour, then you also are net weavers and sorcerers, maybe. He turned a cold glance suddenly upon Legolas and Gimli. Why do you not speak, silent ones? He demanded. Gimli rose and planted his feet firmly apart. His hand gripped the handle of his axe, and his dark eyes flashed. Give me your name, horse master, and I will give you mine, and more besides, he said. As for that, said the rider, staring down at the dwarf, the stranger should declare himself first. Yet I am named Eomer, son of Eormund, and am called the third Marshal of Riddermark. Then, Eomer, son of Eormund, third Marshal of Riddermark, let Gimli the dwarf Gloin's son warn you against foolish words. You speak evil of that which is fair beyond the reach of your thought, and only little wit can excuse you. Eomer's eyes blazed, and the men of Rohan murmured angrily, and closed in, advancing their spears. I would cut off your head, beard and all, master dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground, said Eomer. He stands not alone, said Legolas, bending his bow and fitting an arrow, with hands that moved quicker than sight. He would die before your stroke fell. Eomer raised his sword, and things might have gone ill, but Aragorn sprang between them and raised his hand. Your pardon, Eomer, he cried. When you know more, you will understand why you have angered my companions. We intend no evil to Rohan, nor to any of its folk, neither to man nor to horse. Will you not hear our tale before you strike? I will, said Eomer, lowering his blade. But wanderers in the Riddermark would be wise to be less haughty in these days of doubt. First tell me your right name. First tell me whom you serve, said Aragorn. Are you friend or foe of Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor? I serve only the Lord of the Mark, Theoden, King of Thengol, answered Eomer. We do not serve the power of the Black Land far away, but neither are we yet at open war with him. And if you are fleeing from him, then you had best leave this land. There is trouble now on all our borders, and we are threatened. But we desire only to be free, and to live as we have lived, keeping our own, and serving no foreign lord, good or evil. We welcomed guests kindly in the better days, but in these times the unbidden stranger finds us swift and hard. Come, who are you? Whom do you serve? At whose command do you hunt orcs in our land? I serve no man, said Aragorn, but the servants of Sauron I pursue into whatever land they may go. There are few among mortal men who know more of orcs and I do not hunt them in this fashion out of choice. The orcs whom we pursued took captive 2 of my friends. In such need, a man that has no horse will go on foot, and he will not ask for leave to follow the trail, nor will he count the heads of the enemy save with a sword. I am not weaponless. Aragorn threw back his cloak. The elven sheath glittered as he grasped it, and the bright blade of Andúril shone like a sudden flame as he swept it out. "Elendil," he cried, "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and am called Elessar, the Elfstone, Dunedain, the heir of Isildur, Elendil, son of Gondor. Here is the sword that was broken and is forged again. Will you aid me or thwart me? Choose swiftly." Gimli and Legolas looked at their companion in amazement, for they had not seen him in this mood before. He seemed to have grown in stature while Éomer had shrunk, and in his living face they caught a brief vision of the power and majesty of the kings of stone. For a moment it seemed to the eye of Legolas that a white flame flickered on the brows of Aragorn like a shining crown. Éomer stepped back, and a look of awe was in his face. He cast down his proud eyes. "These are indeed strange days," he muttered. "Dreams and legends spring to life out of the grass." "Tell me, Lord," he said, "what brings you here? And what was the meaning of the dark words? Long has Boromir, son of Denethor, been gone seeking an answer, and the horse that we lent him came back riderless. What doom do you bring out of the north?" "The doom of choice," said Aragorn. "You may say this to Theoden, son of Thengel. Open war lies before him, with Sauron or against him. None may live now as they have lived, and few shall keep what they call their own. But of these great matters we will speak later. If chance allows, I will come myself to the king. Now I am in great need, and I ask for help, or at least for tidings. You heard that we are pursuing an orc host that carried off our friends. What can you tell us?" "That you need not pursue them further," said Éomer. "The orcs are destroyed, and our friends? We found none but orcs." "But that is strange indeed," said Aragorn. "Did you search the slain? Were there no bodies other than those of orc kind? They would be small, only children to your eyes, unshod but clad in grey." "There were no dwarves nor children," said Éomer. "We counted all the slain and despoiled them, and then we piled the carcasses and burned them, as is our custom. The ashes are smoking still." "We do not speak of dwarves or children," said Gimli. "Our friends were hobbits." "Hobbits?" said Éomer. "And what may they be? It is a strange name." "A strange name for a strange folk," said Gimli. "But these were very dear to us. It seems that you have heard in Rohan of the words that troubled Minas Tirith. They spoke of the halfling. These hobbits are halflings." "Halflings?" laughed the rider that stood beside Éomer. "Halflings! But they are only a little people in old songs and children's tales out of the north. Do we walk in legends or on the green earth in the daylight?" "A man may do both," said Aragorn. "For not we, but those who come after will make the legends of our time. The green earth, say you? That is a mighty matter of legend, though you tread it under the light of day." "Time is pressing," said the rider, not heeding Aragorn. "We must hasten south, Lord. Let us leave these wild folk to their fancies, or let us bind them and take them to the king." "Peace, Eothine," said Éomer in his own tongue. "Leave me a while. Tell the Eored to assemble on the path and make ready to ride to the Entwade." Muttering, Eothine retired and spoke to the others. Soon they drew off and left Éomer alone with the 3 companions. "All that you say is strange, Aragorn," he said. "Yet you speak the truth, that is plain. The men of the mark do not lie, and therefore they are not easily deceived. But you have not told all. Will you not now speak more fully of your errand, so that I may judge what to do? I set out from Imladris, as it is named in the rhyme, many weeks ago, answered Aragorn. With me went Boromir of Minas Tirith. My errand was to go to that city where the son of Denethor to aid his folk in their war against Sauron. But the company that I journeyed with had other business, of that I cannot speak now. Gandalf the Grey was our leader. Gandalf! Eomer exclaimed. Gandalf Greyhame is known in the Mark. But his name, I warn you, is no longer a password to the king's favor. He has been a guest in the land many times in the memory of men, coming as he will after a season or after many years. He is ever the herald of strange events, a bringer of evil, some now say. Indeed, since his last coming in the summer, all things have gone amiss. At that time our trouble with Saruman began. Until then, we counted Saruman our friend, but Gandalf came then and warned us that sudden war was preparing in Isengard. He said that he himself had been a prisoner in Orthanc and had hardly escaped, and he begged for help. But Theoden would not listen to him, and he went away. Speak not the name of Gandalf loudly in Theoden's ears. He is wroth. But Gandalf took the horse that is called Shadowfax, the most precious of all the king's steeds, chief of the Mearas, which only the Lord of the Mark may ride. For the sire of their race was the great horse of Eorl, that knew the speech of men. 7 nights ago Shadowfax returned, but the king's anger is not less, for now the horse is wild, and will let no man handle him. Then Shadowfax has found his way alone from the far north, said Aragorn, for it was there that he and Gandalf parted. But alas, Gandalf will ride no longer. He fell into darkness in the mines of Moria, and comes not again. That is heavy tidings, said Eomer, at least to me, and to many, though not to all, as you may find if you come to the king. It is tidings more grievous than any in this land can understand, though it might touch them sorely ere the year is much older, said Aragorn. But when the great fall, the less must lead. My part it has been to guide our company on the long road from Moria. Through Lorien we came, of which it were well that you should learn.
Hey Anthony, how you doing?
Again, and thence down the leagues of the great river to the falls of Rauros. There Boromir was slain by the same orcs whom you destroyed. Your news is all of woe, cried Eomer in dismay. Great harm is this death to Minas Tirith and to us all. That was a worthy man. All spoke his praise. He came seldom to the Mark, for he was ever in the wars on the east borders. But I've seen him, more like to the swift sons of Eorl than to the grave men of Gondor, he seemed to me, and likely to prove a great captain of his people when his time came. But we've had no word of this
day or evening going, Anthony?
When did he fall? It is now the 4th day since he was slain, answered Aragorn, and since the evening of that day we've journeyed from the shadow of Tol Brandir. On foot? Cried Eomer. Yes, even as you see us. Wide wonder came into Eomer's eyes. Strider is too poor a name, son of Arathorn, he said. Wing-foot I name you. This deed of 3 friends shall be sung in many a hall. 40 leagues and 5 you have measured, ere the 4th day is ended. Hardy is the race of Elendil. But now, Lord, what would you have me do? I must return in haste to Theoden. I spoke warily before my men. It's true that we're not yet at open war with the Black Land, and there are some, close to the king's ear, that speak craven counsels, but war is coming. We shall not forsake our old alliance with Gondor, and while they fight we shall aid them. So say I, and all who hold with me. The East Mark is my charge, the ward of the 3rd Marshal, and I've removed all our herds and herd folk, withdrawing them beyond Entwash, and leaving none here but guards and swift scouts. Then you don't pay tribute to Sauron, said Gimli. We do not, and we never have, said Eomer with a flash of his eyes, though it comes to my ears that that lie has been told. Some years ago, the Lord of the Black Land wished to purchase horses of us at great price, but we refused him, for he puts beasts to evil use. Then he sent plundering orcs, and they carry off what they can, choosing always the black horses. Few of these are now left. For that reason our feud with the orcs is bitter. But at this time our chief concern is with Saruman. He's claimed lordship over all this land, and there has been war for many months. He has put into his service, and wolf evil men, and he has closed the gap against us, so that we are likely to be east and west. It's ill dealing with such a foe. He is a wizard both cunning and crafty, having many guises. He walks here and there, they say, as an old man, hooded and cloaked, very like to Gandalf, as many now recall. His spies slip through every net, and his birds of ill omen are abroad in the sky. I don't know how it will all end, and my heart misgives me, but it seems to me that his friends don't all dwell in Isengard. But if you come to the king's house, you shall see for yourself. Will you not come? Do I hope in vain that you have been sent to me for a help in doubt and need? I will come when I may, said Aragorn. Come now, said Eomer. The heir of Elendil would be a strength indeed to the sons of Eorl in this evil tide. There is battle even now upon the West Emnet, and I fear that it may go ill for us. Indeed, in this riding north I went without the king's leave, but in my absence his house is left. But scouts went to the war coast, coming down out of the east wall 3 nights ago, and among them they reported that some bore the white badges of Saruman. So suspecting what I most fear, a league between Orthanc and the Dark Tower, I led forth my Eored, men of my own household, and we overtook the orcs at nightfall 2 days ago, near to the borders of the Entwood. There we surrounded them, and gave battle yesterday at dawn. 15 of my men I lost, and 12 horses, alas. For the orcs were greater in number than we counted on. Others joined them, coming out of the east across the great river. Their trail is plain to see a little north of this spot.
Hitting the cash out definitely be appreciated. You don't have to, but they definitely go towards
also for the white
be able to fix my glasses.
That kind is stronger and more fell than all the others. Nonetheless, we put an end to them.
Don't get me wrong, they're still good, and I can still see, and it works. But
will you not come? There are spare horses.
It'd be better if they weren't all taped up.
There's work for the sword to do. Yes, and we could find a use for Gimli's axe and the bow of Legolas, if they will pardon my rash words concerning the Lady of the Wood. I spoke only as do all men in my land, and I would gladly learn better. I thank you for your fair words, said Aragorn, and my heart desires to come with you, but I cannot desert my friends while hope remains. Hope does not remain, said Eomer. You will not find your friends on the north borders. Yet my friends are not behind. We found a clear token not far from the east wall that one at least of them was still alive there. But between the wall and the downs, we've found no other trace of them, and no trail has turned aside, this way or that, unless my skill has wholly left me. Then what do you think has become of them? I don't know. They may have been slain and burned among the orcs. But that, you will say, can't be, and I don't fear it. I can only think that they were carried off into the forest before the battle, even before you encircled your foes, maybe. Can you swear that none escaped your net in such a way? I would swear that no orc escaped after we sighted them, said Eomer. We reached the forest eaves before them, and if after that any living thing broke through our ring, then it was no orc and had some elvish power. Our friends were attired even as we were, said Aragorn. And you passed us by under the full light of day. I'd forgotten that, said Eomer. It's hard to be sure of anything among so many marvels. The world is all grown strange. Elf and dwarf in company walk in our daily fields, and folks speak with the lady of the wood and yet live, and the sword comes back to war that was broken in the long ages, ere the fathers of our fathers rode into the mark. How shall a man judge what to do in such times? As he ever has judged, said Aragorn. Good and ill have not changed since yesteryear, nor are they one thing among elves and dwarves and another among men. It's a man's part to discern them, as much in the golden wood as in his own house. True indeed, said Eomer, but I don't doubt you, nor the deed which my heart would do, yet I am not free to do all as I would. It's against our law to let strangers wander at will in our land, until the king himself shall give them leave, and more strict is the command in these days of peril. I've begged you to come back willingly with me, and you won't. Loath am I to begin a battle of 100 against 3. I don't think your law was made for such a chance, said Aragorn, nor indeed am I a stranger, for I've been in this land before, more than once, and ridden with the host of the Rohirrim, though under other name and in other guise. You I haven't seen before, for you are young, but I have spoken with Eormund your father, and with Theoden, son of Thengel. Never in former days would any high lord of this land have constrained a man to abandon such a quest as mine. My duty at least is clear, to go on. Come now, son of Eormund, the choice must be made at last. Aid us, or at the worst let us go free, or seek to carry out your law. If you do so, there will be fewer to return to your war or to your king. Eomer was silent for a moment, then he spoke. We both have need of haste, he said. My company chafes to be away, and every hour lessens your hope. This is my choice. You may go, and what is more, I will lend you horses. This only I ask. When your quest is achieved, or is proved vain, return with the horses over the Entwade to Meduseld, the high house in Edoras where Theoden now sits. Thus you shall prove to him that I have not misjudged. In this I place myself, and maybe my very life, in the keeping of your good faith. Don't fail. I will not, said Aragorn. There was great wonder, and many dark and doubtful glances among his men, when Eomer gave orders that the spare horses were to be lent to the strangers, but only Eothine dared to speak openly. It may be well enough for this lord of the race of Gondor, as he claims, he said, but who has heard of a horse of the mark being given to a dwarf? No one, said Gimli, and do not trouble. No one will ever hear of it. I would sooner walk than sit on the back of any beast so great, free or begrudged. But you must ride now, or you will hinder us, said Aragorn. Come, you shall sit behind me, friend Gimli, said Legolas. Then all will be well, and you need neither borrow a horse nor be troubled by one. A great dark grey horse was brought to Aragorn, and he mounted it. Harzufel is his name, said Eomer. May he bear you well, and to better fortune than Gardulf, his late master. A smaller and lighter horse, but restive and fiery, was brought to Legolas. Arod was his name. But Legolas asked them to take off saddle and rein. I need them not, he said, and leapt lightly up, and to their wonder, Arod was tame and willing beneath him, moving here and there with but a spoken word. Such was the elvish way with all good beasts. Gimli was lifted up behind his friend, and he clung to him, not much more at ease than Sam Gamgee in a boat. Farewell, and may you find what you seek, said Eomer. Return with what speed you may, and let our swords hereafter shine together. I will come, said Aragorn. And I will come too, said Gimli. The matter of the Lady Galadriel lies between us, I have yet to teach you gentle speech. We shall see, said Eomer. So many strange things have chanced, that to learn the praise of a fair lady under the loving strokes of a dwarf's axe will seem no great wonder. Farewell. With that they parted. Very swift were the horses of Rohan. When after a little Gimli looked back, the company of Eomer were already small and far away. Aragorn did not look back. He was watching the trail as they sped on their way, bending low with his head beside the neck of Hasselfeld. Before long they came to the borders of the Entwash, and there they met the other trail of which Eomer spoke, coming down from the east out of the wold. Aragorn dismounted and surveyed the ground. Then, leaping back into the saddle, he rode away for some distance eastward, keeping to one side and taking care not to override the footprints. Then he again dismounted and examined the ground, going backwards and forwards on foot. There's little to discover, he said when he returned. The main trail is all confused with the passage of the horsemen as they came back. Their outward course must have lain nearer the river, but this eastward trail is fresh and clear. There's no sign there of any feet going the other way, back towards Anduin. Now we must ride slower, and make sure that no trace or footstep branches off on either side. The orcs must have been aware from this point that they were pursued. They may have made some attempt to get their captives away before they were overtaken. As they rode forward, the day was overcast. Low grey clouds came over the wold. A mist shrouded the sun. Ever nearer the tree-clad slopes of Fangorn loomed, slowly darkling as the sun went west. They saw no sign of any trail to right or left, but here and there they passed single orcs, fallen in their tracks as they ran, with grey feathered arrows sticking in back or throat. At last, as the afternoon was waning, they came to the eaves of the forest, and in an open glade among the first trees they found the place of the great burning. The ashes were still hot and smoking. Beside it was a great pile of helms and mail, cloven shields and broken swords, bows and darts and other gear of war. Upon a stake in the middle was set a great goblin head. Upon its shattered helm the white badge could still be seen. Further away, not far from the river, where it came streaming out from the edge of the wood, there was a mound. It was newly raised. The raw earth was covered with fresh-cut turfs. About it were planted 15 spears. Aragorn and his companions searched far and wide about the field of battle, but the light faded, and evening soon grew down, dim and misty. By nightfall they had discovered no trace of Merry and Pippin. "We can do no more," said Gimli sadly. "We've been set many riddles since we came to Tol Brandir, but this is the hardest to unravel. I would guess that the burned bones of the hobbits are now mingled with the orcs. It'll be hard news for Frodo, if he lives to hear it, and hard too for the old hobbit who waits in Rivendell. Elrond was against their coming." "But Gandalf was not," said Legolas. "But Gandalf chose to come himself, and he was the first to be lost," answered Gimli. "His foresight failed him." "The counsel of Gandalf was not founded on foreknowledge of safety for himself or for others," said Aragorn. "There are some things that it's better to begin than to refuse, even though the end may be dark. But I shall not depart from this place yet. In any case, we must here await the morning light." A little way beyond the battlefield, they made their camp under a spreading tree. It looked like a chestnut, and yet it still bore many broad brown leaves of a former year, like dry hands with long splayed fingers. They rattled mournfully in the night breeze. Gimli shivered. They had brought only one blanket apiece. "Let's light a fire," he said. "I care no longer for the danger. Let the orcs come as thick as summer moths round a candle." "If those unhappy hobbits are astray in the woods, it might draw them hither," said Legolas. "And it might draw other things, neither orc nor hobbit," said Aragorn. "We're near to the mountain marches of the traitor Saruman, and also we're on the very edge of Fangorn, and it's perilous to touch the trees of that wood, it is said." "But the Rohirrim made a great burning here yesterday," said Gimli, "and they felled trees for the fire, as can be seen. Yet they passed the night away safely here, when their labour was ended." "There were many," said Aragorn, "and they don't heed the wrath of Fangorn, for they come here seldom, and they don't go under the trees. But our paths are likely to lead us into the very forest itself, so have a care. Cut no living wood." "There's no need," said Gimli. "The riders have left chip and bough enough, and there's dead wood lying in plenty." He went off to gather fuel, and busied himself with building and kindling a fire, but Aragorn sat silently with his back to the great tree, deep in thought, and Legolas stood alone in the open, looking towards the profound shadow of the wood, leaning forward as one who listens to voices calling from a distance. When the dwarf had a small bright blaze going, the three companions drew close to it and sat together, shrouding the light with their hooded forms. Legolas looked up at the boughs of the tree reaching out above them. "Look," he said, "the tree is glad of the fire." It may have been that the dancing shadows tricked their eyes, but certainly to each of the companions the boughs appeared to be bending this way and that, so as to come above the flames, while the upper branches were stooping down. The brown leaves now stood out stiff, and rubbed together like many cold, cracked hands taking comfort in the warmth. There was a silence, for suddenly the dark and unknown forest, so near at hand, made itself felt as a great brooding presence, full of secret purpose. After a while, Legolas spoke again. "Celeborn warned us not to go far into Fangorn," he said. "Do you know why, Aragorn? What are the fables of the forest that Boromir had heard?" "I've heard many tales in Gondor and elsewhere," said Aragorn. "But if it weren't for the words of Celeborn, I should deem them only fables that men have made as true knowledge fades. I thought of asking you what was the truth of the matter, and if an elf of the wood doesn't know, how shall a man answer?" "You've journeyed further than I," said Legolas. "I've heard nothing of this in my own land, save only songs that tell how the Onodrim, the men called Ents, dwelt there long ago. But Fangorn is old, old even as the elves would reckon it." "Yes, it's old," said Aragorn, "as old as the forest by the Barrow Downs, and it's far greater. Elrond says that the two are akin, the last strongholds of the mighty woods of the elder days, in which the firstborn roamed while men's they slept. But Fangorn holds some secret of its own. What it is, I don't know." "I don't wish to know," said Gimli. "Let nothing that dwells in Fangorn be troubled on my account." They now drew lots for the watches, and the lot for the first watch fell to Gimli. The others lay down. Almost at once, sleep laid hold on them. "Gimli," said Aragorn drowsily, "remember, it's perilous to cut bough or twig from a living tree in Fangorn, but don't stray far in search of dead wood. Let the fire die, rather. Call me at need." With that he fell asleep. Legolas already lay motionless, his fair hands folded upon his breast, his eyes unclosed, blending living night and deep dream, as is the way with elves. Gimli sat hunched by the fire, running his thumb thoughtfully along the edge of his axe. The tree rustled. There was no other sound. Suddenly Gimli looked up, and there, just on the edge of the firelight, stood an old bent man, leaning on a staff, and wrapped in a great cloak. His wide-brimmed hat was pulled down over his eyes. Gimli sprang up, too amazed for the moment to cry out, though at once the thought flashed into his mind that Saruman had caught them. Both Aragorn and Legolas, aroused by his sudden movement, sat up and stared. The old man didn't speak or make a sign. "Well, father, what can we do for you?" said Aragorn, leaping to his feet. "Come and be warm if you're cold." He strode forward, but the old man was gone. There was no trace of him to be found near at hand, and they didn't dare to wander far. The moon had set, and the night was very dark. Suddenly Legolas gave a cry. "The horses! The horses!" The horses were gone. They dragged their pickets and disappeared. For some time the three companions stood still and silent, troubled by this new stroke of ill fortune. They were under the eaves of Fangorn, and endless leagues lay between them and the men of Rohan, their only friends in this wide and dangerous land. As they stood, it seemed to them that they heard, far off in the night, the sound of horses whinnying and neighing. Then all was quiet again, except for the cold rustle of the wind. "Well, they're gone," said Aragorn at last. "We can't find them or catch them, so that if they don't return of their own free will, we must do without. We started on our own feet, and we have those still." "Feet," said Gimli, "but we can't eat them as well as walk on them." He threw some fuel on the fire and slumped down beside it. "Only a few hours ago you were unwilling to sit on a horse of Rohan," laughed Legolas. "But you'll make a rider yet." "It seems unlikely that I shall have the chance," said Gimli. "If you wish to know what I think," he began again after a while, "I think it was Saruman. Who else? Remember the words of Eomer. He walks about like an old man hooded and cloaked. Those were the words. He's gone off with our horses, or scared them away, and here we are. There's more trouble coming to us, mark my words." "I mark them," said Aragorn, "but I marked also that this old man had a hat, not a hood. Still, I don't doubt that you guess right, and that we're in peril here by night or day. Yet in the meantime, there is nothing that we can do but rest while we may. I'll watch for a while now, Gimli. I've more need of thought than of sleep." The night passed slowly. Legolas followed Aragorn, and Gimli followed Legolas, and their watches wore away. But nothing happened. The old man didn't appear again, and the horses did not return. Chapter 3. The Uruk-hai. Pippin lay in a dark and troubled dream. It seemed that he could hear his own small voice echoing in black tunnels, calling Frodo, Frodo. But instead of Frodo, hundreds of hideous orc faces grinned at him out of the shadows. Hundreds of hideous arms grasped at him from every side. Where was Merry? He woke. Cold air blew on his face. He was lying on his back. Evening was coming, and the sky above was growing dim. He turned and found that the dream was little worse than the waking. His wrists, legs, and ankles were tied with cords. Beside him Merry lay, white-faced, with a dirty rag bound across his brows. All about them sat or stood a great company of orcs. Slowly in Pippin's aching head, memory pieced itself together and became separated from dream shadows. Of course, he and Merry had run off into the woods. What had come over them? Why had they dashed off like that, taking no notice of old Strider? They'd run a long way shouting. He couldn't remember how far or how long, and then suddenly they'd crashed right into a group of orcs. They were standing listening, and they didn't appear to see Merry and Pippin until they were almost in their arms. Then they yelled, and dozens of other goblins had sprung out of the trees. Merry and he had drawn their swords, but the orcs didn't wish to fight, and had tried only to lay hold of them, even when Merry had cut off several of their arms and hands. Good old Merry! Then Boromir had come leaping through the trees. He had made them fight. He slew many of them, and the rest fled. But they hadn't gone far on the way back when they were attacked again by 100 orcs at least, some of them very large, and they shot a rain of arrows, always at Boromir. Boromir had blown his great horn till the woods rang, and at first the orcs had been dismayed and had drawn back. But when no answer but the echoes came, they'd attacked more fiercely than ever. Pippin didn't remember much more. His last memory was a Boromir leaning against a tree, plucking out an arrow. Then darkness fell suddenly. "I suppose I was knocked on the head," he said to himself. "I wonder if poor Merry is much hurt. What has happened to Boromir? Why didn't the orcs kill us? Where are we? And where are we going?" He couldn't answer the questions. He felt cold and sick. "I wish Gandalf had never persuaded Elrond to let us come," he thought. "What good have I been? Just a nuisance, a passenger, a piece of luggage. And now I've been stolen, and I'm just a piece of luggage for the orcs. I hope Strider or someone will come and claim us. But ought I to hope for it? Won't that throw out all the plans? I wish I could get free." He struggled a little, quite uselessly. One of the orcs sitting near laughed and said something to a companion in their abominable tongue. "Rest while you can, little fool," he said then to Pippin in the common speech, which he made almost as hideous as his own language. "Rest while you can. We'll find a use for your legs before long. You'll wish you'd got none before we get home." "If I had my way, you'd wish you were dead now," said the other. "I'll make you squeak, you miserable rat." He stooped over Pippin, bringing his yellow fangs close to his face. He had a black knife with a long, jagged blade in his hand. "Lie quiet, or I'll tickle you with this," he hissed. "Don't draw attention to yourself, or I may forget my orders. Curse the Isengarders." "Ogloka bagrong sha pushdog saramon globbuko sky." He passed into a long, angry speech in his own tongue that slowly died away into muttering and snarling. Terrified, Pippin lay still, though the pain at his wrists and ankles was growing, and the stones beneath him were boring into his back. To take his mind off himself, he listened intently to all that he could hear. There were many voices round him, and though orc speech sounded at all times full of hate and anger, it seemed plain that something like a quarrel had begun and was getting hotter. To Pippin's surprise, he found that much of the talk was intelligible. Many of the orcs were using ordinary language. Apparently the members of 2 or 3 quite different tribes were present, and they couldn't understand one another's orc speech. There was an angry debate concerning what they were to do now, which way they were to take, and what should be done with the prisoners. "There's no time to kill them properly," said one. "No time for play on this trip." "That can't be helped," said another. "But why not kill them quick? Kill them now. They're a cursed nuisance, and we're in a hurry. Evening's coming on, and we ought to get a move on." "Orders," said a third voice in a deep growl. "Kill all but not the halflings. They're to be brought back alive as quickly as possible. That's my orders." "What do they want it for?" asked several voices. "Why, alive. Do they give sport?" "No, I heard that one of them has got something that's wanted for the war, some elvish plot or other. Anyway, they'll both be questioned." "Is that all you know? Why don't we search them and find out? We might find something that we could use ourselves." "That is a very interesting remark," sneered a voice, softer than the others but more evil. "I may have to report that. The prisoners are not to be searched or plundered. Those are my orders." "And mine too," said the deep voice. "Alive."
Hey Scott, how you doing?
"No spoiling. That's my orders."
Hope you're doing well.
"Not our orders," said one of the earlier voices. "We've come all the way from the mines to kill and avenge our folk. I wish to kill and then go back north." "And you can wish again," said the growling voice. "I am Ugluk. I command. I return to Isengard by the shortest road." "Is Saruman the master of the Great Eye?" said the evil voice. "We should go back at once to Lugbor's." If we could cross the great river, we might, said another voice. But there aren't enough of us to venture down to the bridges. I came across, said the evil voice. A wind Nazgul awaits us northward on the east bank. Maybe. Then you'll fly off with our prisoners and get all the pay and praise in Lugboars and leave us to foot it as best we can through the horse country. No, we must stick together. These lands are dangerous, full of foul rebels and brigands. Aye, we must stick together, growled O'Rourke. I don't trust you, little swine. You've no guts outside your own styes. But for us, you'd all have run away. We are fighting Uruk-hai. We slew the great warrior.
Hope everyone's doing good out there today.
We are the servants of Saruman the Wise, the White Hand, the hand that gives us men's flesh to eat. We came out of Isengard and led you here, and we shall lead you back by the way we choose. I am O'Rourke. I have spoken. You have spoken more than enough, O'Rourke, sneered the evil voice. I wonder how they would like it in Lugboars. They might think that O'Rourke's shoulders needed relieving of a swollen head. They might ask where his strange ideas came from. Did they come from Saruman, perhaps? Who does he think he is, sitting up on his own with his filthy white badgers? They might agree with me, with Grishnak, their trusted messenger, and I, Grishnak, say this. Saruman is a fool, and a dirty, treacherous fool, but the great eye is on him. Swine, is it? How do you folk like being called swine by the muckrakers of a dirty little wizard? It's orc flesh they eat, I'll warrant. Many loud yells in orc speech answered him, and the ringing clash of weapons being drawn. Cautiously Pippin rolled over, hoping to see what would happen. His guards had gone to join in the fray. In the twilight, he saw a large black orc, probably O'Rourke, standing facing Grishnak, a short, crook-legged creature, very broad and with long arms that hung almost to the ground. Round them were many smaller goblins. Pippin supposed that these were the ones from the north. They had drawn their knives and swords, but hesitated to attack O'Rourke. O'Rourke shouted, and a number of other orcs of nearly his own size ran up. Then suddenly, without warning, O'Rourke sprang forwards, and with two swift strokes swept the heads off two of his opponents. Grishnak stepped aside and vanished into the shadows. The others gave way, and one stepped backwards and fell over Merry's prostrate form with a curse. Yet that probably saved his life, for O'Rourke's followers leapt over him and cut down another with their broad-bladed swords. It was the yellow-fanged guard. His body fell right on top of Pippin, still clutching its long, saw-edged knife. Put up your weapons, shouted O'Rourke, and let's have no more nonsense. We go straight west from here and down the from there straight to the downs, then along the river to the forest, and we march day and night. That clear? Now, thought Pippin, if only it takes that ugly fellow a little while to get his troop under control, I've got a chance. A gleam of hope had come to him. The edge of the black knife had snipped his arm, and then slid down to his wrist. He felt the blood trickling onto his hand, but he also felt the cold touch of steel against his skin. The orcs were getting ready to march again, but some of the northerners were still unwilling, and the Isengarders slew two more before the rest were cowed. There was much cursing and confusion. For the moment, Pippin was unwatched. His legs were securely bound, but his arms were only tied about the wrists, and his hands were in front of him. He could move them both together, though the bonds were cruelly tight. He pushed the dead orc to one side, then, hardly daring to breathe, he drew the knot of the wrist cord up and down against the blade of the knife. It was sharp, and the dead hand held it fast. The cord was cut. Quickly Pippin took it in his fingers and knotted it again into a loose bracelet of 2 loops and slipped it over his hands. Then he lay very still. Pick up those prisoners, shouted Ugluk. Don't play any tricks with them. If they're not alive when we get back, someone else will die too. An orc seized Pippin like a sack, put its head between his tight hands, grabbed his arms and dragged them down until Pippin's face was crushed against its neck. Then it jolted off with him. Another treated Merry in the same way. The orc's claw-like hand gripped Pippin's arms like iron. The nails bit into him. He shut his eyes and slipped back into evil dreams. Suddenly he was thrown onto the stony floor again. It was early night, but the slim moon was already falling westward. They were on the edge of a cliff that seemed to look out over a sea of pale mist. There was a sound of water falling nearby. "The scouts have come back at last," said an orc close at hand. "Well, what did you discover?" growled the voice of Ugluk. "Only a single horseman, and he made off westward. All's clear now." "No, I dare say. But how long, you fools? You should have shot him. He'll raise the alarm. The cursed horse breeders will hear of us by morning. Now we'll have to leg it double quick." A shadow bent over Pippin. It was Ugluk. "Sit up," said the orc. "My lads are tired of lugging you about. We've got to climb down, and you must use your legs. Be careful now. No crying out. No trying to escape. We have ways of paying for tricks that you won't like, though they won't spoil your usefulness for the master." He cut the thongs round Pippin's legs and ankles, picked him up by his hair and stood him on his feet. Pippin fell down, and Ugluk dragged him up by his hair again. Several orcs laughed. Ugluk thrust a flask between his teeth and poured some burning liquid down his throat. He felt a hot, fierce glow flow through him. The pain in his legs and ankles vanished. He could stand. "Now for the other," said Ugluk. Pippin saw him go to Merry, who was lying close by, and kick him. Merry groaned. Seizing him roughly, Ugluk pulled him into a sitting position and tore the bandage off his head. Then he smeared the wound with some dark stuff out of a small wooden box. Merry cried out and struggled wildly. The orcs clapped and hooted. "Can't take his medicine," they jeered. "Doesn't know what's good for him. Aye, we shall have some fun later." But at the moment, Ugluk wasn't engaged in sport. He needed speed and had to humor unwilling followers. He was healing Merry in orc fashion, and his treatment worked swiftly. When he'd forced a drink from his flask down the hobbit's throat, cut his leg bonds, and dragged him to his feet, Merry stood up, looked pale but grim and defiant, and very much alive. The gash in his forehead gave him no more trouble. He bore a brown scar to the end of his days. "Hello, Pippin," he said. "So you've come on this little expedition too? Where do we get bed and breakfast?" "Now then," said Ugluk, "none of that. Hold your tongues. No talk to one another. Any trouble will be reported at the other end, and he'll know how to pay you. You'll get bed and breakfast all right, more than you can stomach." The orc band began to descend a narrow ravine leading down into the misty plain below. Merry and Pippin, separated by a dozen orcs or more, climbed down with them. At the bottom they stepped onto grass, and the hearts of the hobbits rose. "Now straight on," shouted Ugluk. "West and a little north. Follow Lugdush." "But what are we going to do at sunrise?" said some of the northerners. "Go on running," said Ugluk. "What do you think? Sit on the grass and wait for the whiteskins to join the picnic? But we can't run in the sunlight." "You'll run with me behind you," said Ugluk. "Run, or you'll never see your beloved holes again. By the white hand, what's the use of sending out mountain maggots on a trip only half-trained? Run, curse you, run while night lasts." Then the whole company began to run with the long, loping strides of orcs. They kept no order, thrusting, jostling and cursing, yet their speed was very great. Each hobbit had a guard of 3. Pippin was far back in the line. He wondered how long he would be able to go on at this pace. He had had no food since the morning. One of his guards had a whip, but at present the orc liquor was still hot in him. His wits, too, were wide awake. Every now and again there came into his mind, unbidden, a vision of the keen face of Strider, bending over a dark trail and running behind. But what could even a ranger see except a confused trail of orc feet? His own little prince and Meres were overwhelmed by the trampling of the iron-shod shoes before them and behind them and about them. They had gone only a mile or so from the cliff when the land sloped down into a wide, shallow depression, where the ground was soft and wet. Mist lay there, pale glimmering in the last rays of the sickle moon. The dark shapes of the orcs in front grew dim.
There we go. Start that up again tomorrow. I'm gonna call into this live for tonight, everyone. I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and everyone continues to stop by. I definitely appreciate all y'all support. Until next time, y'all stay safe out there.